Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mills and Reeve Halftime Equaliser, a series that aims to shed light on inspiring journeys and stories of women in sport and the sports industry in general. Today, I am very happy to be joined by a colleague from India, Namrata Chatterjee. Namrata and I actually started our legal careers around the same time in India, both at big law firms, after which um, we both sort of followed our paths into sports law. And she's had a really interesting career to date. She's worked as a legal counsel at the Asian Football Confederation in Malaysia, which I'm sure she will be happy to tell you more about. But currently, she serves as the league secretary at the ISL, the Indian Super League in India, for which the 2021 season is due to start in a couple of weeks. So without further ado, let's get to it. And hi, Namrata, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for that nice introduction. And I'm really excited to talk to you today and just have a good conversation.
Exactly. That's what this is about. If you could just tell us a bit about your journey so far, how you got to where you are, because I personally know it's an interesting one, and I'm sure it will be of interest to many others.
No, thank you for asking that because, for me, I will start with the fact that I am a sports lawyer today or working in sports. It kind of goes back to the fact that I'm a sports fan. When I was like young, it's always been like I loved watching cricket. Then I got into football and tennis, etc. So the funny bit is that I don't really play any sport, but I've always been like the sports fan, the spectator, and I always believe that any sports cannot be successful or what it is without the fans. So yeah, so it started from being a fan, and then because I was in law school. I was doing my undergrad law, 5 years law thing in India from National University, Jodhpur, and initially I hadn't really thought about working in sports law. It was more like, yeah, like the usual like corporate law, the litigation, disputes, etc. that I was focusing on. But I would like say I got really interested in the intellectual property rights and those kind of things. And while I was doing my while I was studying like intellectual property rights and those subjects, I came across some interesting congruence, so to say, but of sports and IP. So from that, I started reading more about it, and then I was quite interested to know that there's a whole area, so to say, of law called sports law. Like people are already out there working in this niche area, so to say. Okay, I was intrigued, but I didn't know much about it. So then I decided to do some internships to find out because in India at that time there weren't too many sports lawyers or people even working like in the sports legal industry, so to say. And I found out about this law offices of Nandan Kamath, who this is probably I'm talking about 10 years back, 10 years back. So at that time they were also a new like firm, like probably 5 years since they had started and stuff. But they were doing a lot of like it was practiced as a boutique sports law firm. So they were doing a lot of ICC cricket related work and IPL related work, the Indian Premier League, all the cricket, but more cricket than football or any other sport. But I got an opportunity to intern with them, and that's where I really like got into like sports law. There I also got to work a little bit on the agreement side of things, the athlete contracts, etc. So those kind of things. After that, taking from that, I decided to kind of try out more internships and read more about it. And I interned with Justice Mukul Mudgal. He at the time had just done like a probing into some doping scandal and some other scandal in India relating to some athletes and integrity issues, etc. So when I interned with him, I actually that's when I was introduced to anti-doping in sports. So I could see that you had these whole commercial side of sports, you had the intellectual property related things, you had like the doping related things, Then Justice Mudgal was also an arbitrator at the time. So I got to experience like arbitration and how it's carried out, very good experiences. But that helped me kind of shape it for myself that if possible, I would like to make a future and a career in sports law. But that was still in like, my penultimate year of like law school, etc. And in the final year, I got through like the campus placements that we had, and I got placed into this top law firm in the country at the time, etc. So I was like, okay, I've got this job. Should I just go through the secure path and try that out, because everybody was doing the law firm jobs and other things. So I was like, let me at least try that, because sports law, like I said, in India was very limited. So I wasn't sure I want to straight away dive into it right after law school, or should I take my time to kind of, go into it. So I started with the law firm experience. Very good work experience. Like I learned a lot, definitely. But then I realized law firm is not for me. Like, there was not enough work life balance. And I was doing a lot of corporate commercial things. But even during the law firm, I realized I'm enjoying litigation, dispute resolution, regulatory work more. So I wanted to work more in that, work more in IP, sports, etc. So while I was in the law firm, I started looking for masters in sports law. Like I didn't know if I would succeed or not, but the idea was to give it a try. So I applied to the FIFA Master. The FIFA Master actually has three parts to it. It starts with the Leicester module, where we do humanities of sport. Then we move to the Milan module, which is about the business of sports. And then the last part of it is the sports law module, which happens in Switzerland in Neuchâtel. And that master's really pushed me to like, I like enjoyed sports law module a lot there. So I was more sure that, yeah, I think I would like to kind of, work in sports law. So after that, that's where again I met like, James Kitching. He had come to give like a lecture to us, a guest lecture, and he was working at AFC at the time. So he really gave us the insight into all of that, and that intrigued me. And I was like, it would be great to be able to work in Asia. Like I would also be close to home, and it would be good, like Asian. I would be able to contribute to Indian football, Asian football in some way. But later, after I graduated, etc., there was a vacancy, and when there was a vacancy, I applied, and so it was all a process for me. It held, and ultimately, it worked out. And then came the AFC part of it. I was working in AFC for close to 3 years. So again, really good working experience. And I was working in the regulatory sports legal department, as we used to call it. And it was the regulatory disciplinary, like I did a lot of disciplinary work there. So all like, not just the red cards or the on-field, disputes. It was also about the off-field things. Like, so yeah, that was my journey till then. I had a good time. I would be working as a legal officer even for competitions, like all like different AFC competitions. So I would be traveling for the competitions. It would be crazy hectic during those competitions, because we would be also doing our back office work as well as daily matches back to back. So everything that would happen in the match. For the rest of the team, like the operations team, etc., competitions team, they would be working during the match and before the match. For us, the main work started after the match ended. So even late night, whenever like the match would end, we would sit down with the videos from the match to see, oh, red card. Okay, now let's get the video evidence, collecting evidence, preparing the case, sending out show cause charge notices to the parties, carrying out these things like super fast, because before, for especially for sporting sanctions, we had to ensure that the decisions are taken by the independent disciplinary committee, etc., before their next matches, etc. But then after almost 3 years, I was like, yeah, I've had this experience. It was good, but probably I want to come back to India and probably, try something, try to work in the Indian sports industry also for a while, get some more varied experience, if possible, move beyond just the limited, ambit I was working in. And again, it really worked out for me to start working in ISL. I also have another alumni here, Rochak, like who is like my reporting manager also. He's also a FIFA Master alumni. So yeah, it's been good for me to have been, working in sports and getting my alumni also like, around to guide me and help me ease into the organizations, so to say. But yeah, I joined ISL. It's been a little over a year and a half. I've joined right in the middle of the pandemic, so I haven't really had the chance to really go physically to office so far. It's been majority all work from home and everything. But yeah, the work's been really good so far. And here I'm working as a league secretary. So the work is a little different from what I was doing at AFC. But yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting how that FIFA Masters network has sort of carried you through, the your journey from India to Europe, then to Malaysia, and then back to India. And what I thought was interesting was when you said that you were looking to do something slightly more, I guess, broader than what you were doing as a legal counsel at the Asian Football Confederation. And I think it seems like you found exactly that in your role as a league secretary at the ISL. And while I suppose you obviously deal with legal issues, as correct me if I'm wrong, but a sort of general counsel at the ISL, your role as league secretary is perhaps a lot broader than just that. So can you tell us a bit more about what exactly the role involves, and what is a typical day if there is one, because I know the cliche about how there no 2 days are the same. So but if you could sort of take us through what a day in the life of the ISL league secretary looks like, that would be great.
So yeah, I can say that like what you said, it's pretty much correct that the work here is beyond just the league, like only the legal issues. It's something like that's what I said. I feel really good, with this role because it kind of gives me the opportunity to work like be more involved in Indian football firstly, and also like it's not just like I'm not at the back office, not just doing the only the legal issues or the paperwork. I'm also like part of the so we have a competitions team here, the operations team here, different teams. They work like in different operations and marketing, different teams. But everybody, like as the legal person also, I work with everyone. I work with like all departments. I work with everyone. And for all day-to-day things, I'm also part of the competitions team in the broad sense because with them I work the most. So be it like drafting the regulations. So my competitions team colleagues probably would be drafting the first draft of some of the guidelines, the different suppose like there are guidelines on security guidelines, guidelines on medical issues, medical guidelines, like all different guidelines. They would be probably drafting the first draft. I would be reviewing it, working with them. So to understand, like, so that's what I'm saying. It's not just like the football disciplinary work, right? It's all different guidelines, be it the uh, the actual operations guidelines, be it like I said the medical security, stadium operations, like all these different elements, marketing, media, broadcast, like all different, we make guidelines. So I need to know more about all of these fields to be able to help with reviewing the guidelines or like, doing this. So working here and working with all these departments, that's how I can say that my work is broader because now I understand how these different departments function, how, what are the elements of broadcasting, what are the elements of the digital team, everything like. So it's really broad in that sense that I am reviewing all these different regulations. I am even drafting some of them. The league rules, of course, I'm mainly in charge of, which has the whole competition format to the disciplinary, like all entire sections, everything about the league is part of the league rules. So yeah, I mean, I'm doing a lot of these regulatory work, but apart from that, I'm also involved in the governance side of things. So like dealing with any of the ISL governance issues, I'm also required to give my input and help out with the governance legal side of
Yeah.
all those things. And another thing which I'm really getting involved in here, which is the so to say the corporate commercial issues also, like which again, like I said, in the past I've done less of, but here I'm getting the chance to work the because again, so there are sponsorship elements, right? So but sponsorship elements, so legal issues relating to that. So I'm also helping out with those. I'm helping out with some of the different agreements, be it the no objection certificates, the terms and conditions. So like the regulatory, disciplinary, etc. is all kind of my responsibility. But I'm also doing a lot of these like other side of things. I'm conducting workshops. I mean, I'm helping with technical workshops. I'm presenting for match commissioner workshops, like all these different elements. It's like a wider thing, like in that sense. We are also thinking of conducting workshops targeting for player education, because like as a league, like these are some new initiatives I've thought of and we want to implement now, like that uh, like we of course do so much for implementing and running operations, everything, but as a league we would also do a bit more of educational workshops. So we are planning those things also for the future,
Right.
be it like on issues like racism and all of those things. But we are planning to kind of how to use probably the social media and how to like all these things which are very relevant for sports persons, young sports persons, and how it affects their career. So these are all different ideas and things we are now working on and planning for the future.
So moving on, there's a lot that you're doing clearly at the ISL, but recently there's been two initiatives in that have been talked about in the press quite a bit that have caught my eye, and the reason that they have is because they both relate to very topical issues, not just in sport but more generally. The first is that the ISL were the first Indian sports league, correct me if I'm wrong, to launch their own NFT, or as it's called, a non-fungible token. It's been quite a NFTs and crypto in general has been quite a hot topic recently, and yeah, it's interesting that their adoption has sort of seeped into sport as well. So that's one, and I'll let you comment on it. But let's introduce the other one, which is the launch of an EISL, which is essentially an esports version of the ISL, which, as I understand, is going to run concurrently with the ISL season, the 2021 season, which is due to start in a couple of weeks. Um, Again, a very interesting initiative given the growth and popularity of esports. So very briefly, again, I know a lot of sensitive, confidential information, but any insight into those two initiatives would be appreciated.
No, no, I mean, of course, this is something which is, of course, very talked about at the moment, even in India and even otherwise. And I can say one thing that, the idea behind like both of these, ventures is to kind of like we say, like, since I mean, I'll go back a little and say, since I've started working in Indian football, I can see there are a lot of Indian football fans. Like overall, we probably didn't know so much because cricket fans were more vocal, more out there. But there are a lot of Indian football fans. Like, of course, there are Indian fans who watch, foreign clubs and support like foreign clubs and watch the Premier League and other leagues. But I can see a big growth already in, fans who are enjoying and watching the Indian football teams. Like, of course, there have been historical fans and historical teams, like, for the Bengal teams, like the ISL teams currently, there's a lot of growth. And the youth is like, so, you want to target the youth to kind of, people who are still starting out to develop their favorites, who are, just starting to watch football. You also want to target those kind of people to become fans of the sport in India. So EISL or things like uh, the digital like medium like NFTs, etc., would attract a lot of youth, would attract a lot of like the younger population, the population which is very much on social media, on the digital channels, who are more technological, like techno savvy, so to say, and things like that. So with both these ventures, it'll also help with that mindset, like the promotion from that mindset. And EISL is like a esports venture, as you rightly mentioned, and it will be running like parallelly with the league this season, like in the coming season, and it's going to have like qualifiers for all the 11 clubs to get the their teams like from the qualifiers. Then after that, there'll be the round final round. It'll be a double eliminator, and
So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on where you see the women's game going in India, and what is the ISL, or I guess your parent company FSDL, doing to promote it in over the next few years?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's really good to see Bala Devi, like, with her professional contract and doing so well for India. And I feel the more you see women on your screens, the more there would be future participation. That's pretty much how it works. The more we talk about it, the more it's out there. And in today's world, social media, like the more it's out there, the more you will have, like, participation, talking about it, and things like that. And I would say that in India, at the moment, it's still in a very developing stage, but the intention is definitely there to take it forward. Because even from FSDL, I can say that like before COVID, like all this time, like they had done like a whole like a tournament for like uh, clubs, for women's clubs and women's this thing. And the idea was to kind of take it forward in the future years. With COVID, it was stalled a bit, and then again in the future we'll restart that. So the intention and the idea is definitely there, but again, I would say in implementation, there's still a long way to go. The but since you have the intention, you started strategizing, I can say that it will definitely reach better heights. But at the moment, it's still not there. It's still like pretty much at a nascent stage. But what I feel overall for Indian women's football, hosting the Asian Cup, for Women's Asian Cup, will be a big thing. Like I personally, when I was at AFC, so I used to be like, for whatever reason, it was a coincidence, but I ended up being the legal officer for all the women's competitions at AFC while I was there. We had different legal councils, and it would be allotted like different people, different competitions. But for whatever reason, I ended up doing all the three, like the under 16, the under 19, as well as the Women's Asian Cup when I was there.
Right.
And the last time the Women's Asian Cup was in Jordan, but the matches were really good. Like some of the matches were so competitive, so fun to watch. Like I really enjoyed watching, like Australia and Japan, and some of the teams like Sam Kerr. I saw her there, I became a fan, and later she joined like Chelsea, a team like I support. So it was like, yeah, I love this girl. Like I would watch her, like when she was playing for Australia. So that's how I was more also like involved and introduced to kind of following women's sport. But so, and I feel an event like Asian Cup being hosted by India will definitely give it more visibility, will definitely give it that exposure, and then the impetus to kind of develop it further. Once you see the reactions when something is hosted, you see interest, then you get more motivated to kind of develop it even more. So I think it's happening at the right time, and it'll really take it ahead. And then, of course, the FIFA under 17, like, the Women's World Cup is also going to happen. It got delayed, but it'll happen again, in due time.
Yeah.
These two events, I feel, will really give it a good push. And of course, like, FSDL would want to like to help in the future development. There's an Indian Women's League there, but again, I think that needs a lot more development. That's my personal opinion at the moment, that the Indian Women's League really needs a lot more development at this
Right.
stage.
Well, and it sounds like the only way is up, and you will hopefully be front and center in that journey. So, I mean, it certainly sounds like you've had a very interesting experience in women's football at all these various tournaments. Would you say, um, coming more onto, again, this bit more of a personal question, what would you say has been the highlight of your career so far?
That's a interesting question because I've had a lot of good moments, a lot of different things. But yeah, probably if I have to pick out like a few, just to say, uh, because just one highlight. But yeah, I would probably start with being there at the Asian Cup, the both the women's and the men's. But the men's, I would say more so because India was playing in the Asian
In the
Cup,
UAE, yeah.
in the UAE, and I was there as a legal officer. But that was the first tournament where I also was a fan because before that, all the other tournaments I worked at, I was only a legal counsel and enjoying football as a fan overall, but not as an Indian football fan. But at UAE, I would also go on India's match day as a spectator. I would go there as a spectator, sit in the stands, and also watch those matches. And watching India win against Thailand, with 4 goals, etc. That was a very good moment as a fan and working in football, Indian football, seeing it that was a good moment. Then even at ISL, working last season in this COVID situation bubble, wow, what pulling off a whole successful season in this, probably another big highlight so far.
Great. That's amazing. And I mean, yeah, the idea of the ISL, I guess for those that don't know, last season and this season, because of COVID, is being held exclusively in Goa. One of probably my favorite place ever. And so the idea of being stuck in a bubble is in Goa. I guess I romanticize in my head, but is probably not, um, is not everything you at least I think it is, because you're probably very restricted in terms of what you can and can't do. Taking things a bit more casually now. I know you just said you're a Chelsea supporter. Um, I guess it's a good time to be a Chelsea supporter as well. Um, but if you could have one Chelsea player, past or present, uh, play in the ISL, who would you pick and why?
Wow, you put me in a tough spot here because
Just one.
just one. I know that's not fair, but I don't know. I mean, I will go with my personal all-time, favorite footballer, who also happens to be an ex-Chelsea footballer. So, it'll make it easier for me to say it in that way.
Go
It's
on.
Michael Ballack.
Okay.
So I would
Great.
in his prime, in his peak, I would love to, have him play in the ISL. And yeah, I mean, would have totally loved that.
Interesting. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought you'd have picked Balak, but yeah, a great pick nonetheless. Um, Great. So thank you. I think to finish off, I'm gonna ask you three rapid fire questions. The idea is not to give you too much time to think. Um, they won't probably relate to sport. They might. The first one, beach or mountains?
Beach.
Great. So you're in the right place for the ISL in Goa then. What was the last meal you had?
Uh, Spaghetti.
Great. Spaghetti. Interesting. Uh, and finally, controversial one for someone working in football in India, but football or cricket?
I don't know how to answer that one because I really love cricket too. That's the sport I started watching first. That's the sport which got me into sports. But I really, really love football also, and I'm working in football. So I don't think I can choose. Like in this on this Sunday when it was like the Super Sports Day, I was watching the India Pakistan cricket match also, and I was watching the other Manchester United match, the Liverpool match. Like I was shifting and watching like all those matches too.
And you were
So
probably better off staying away from the India-Pakistan match for obvious reasons.
probably.
So,
But yeah, I'm also a tennis fan. So if like you put that into the mix, then like it happened with me when we had the ICC
the
Cricket
finals of the
World
World
Cup
Cup,
and the Wimbledon.
Djokovic, Federer, yes.
It was, and I'm a huge Federer fan. So it was like I was just changing channels left, right, and center, and yeah. So
Well, okay, that's a good note to end on. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to speak. I appreciate how busy you are. So thank you for taking the time. And yeah, we look forward to picking up this conversation later.
thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it was like a great conversation, and
Of
it
course.
was good that I could share some of the insights from my work, from my life, and yeah, it was just really nice talking to you and catching up over.
Likewise, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Namrata.
you.